Hey, good afternoon. For one, thank you for being here. I'm pretty sure I'm competing with this time slot with spinach artichoke dip, so really, I know you guys really are passionate for being here. But yeah, so let's get into it. Just a quick, who is this guy standing up here? So currently the CEO and co-founder of a data security startup named Phalanx. We're focused in secure file transfers and storage. But prior to that, I was in industry doing a couple of different hodgepodge of things, data science, software engineering. And then before that, spent a number of years in the military, specifically with Army Cyber, which I still, after active duty, went into the reserves, mostly as a cyber capabilities developer. So, really focused on building all the fun tools for people to play around with. And then also do a PhD research focused, again, kind of in artificial intelligence and cyber. So as you can tell, I'm passionate about it. So if you guys want to roast me on Twitter, feel free. That's my handle. I have that spread out throughout the presentation, so feel free to take pictures. But my only ask is if you roast me, make sure you @ me. So what does this next hour look like? Talking about the future of cybersecurity. I got a lot of stats, so they're not going to try to make it boring, but it's actually going to be good picture fodder for you if you prove to your loved ones that you actually came to RVAsec. Second, there's going to be a number of polls, so please participate. There's some interesting ones that'll really be telling for the crowd. And then third, again, if you want to tweet angrily at me, feel free to do so. Just make sure you at me so I can try to be witty and respond. So, first poll of the day. Actually, first poll is how early did you think I was going to do a poll? But who thinks human error is an issue? See a show of hands. All right, not everybody. So this might change your mind. When you think about how traffic doesn't actually exist and it's just human error over and over again, it really does piss you off. So, given that, who thinks human error is a problem now? Anyone's minds changed? So, going into why are we talking about human error, specifically cybersecurity? For the most part, if you, I would say, survey or talk to a lot of cybersecurity professionals, and you mention that, how bad are your users? How bad is human error? People generally agree that, hey, there's a problem here. But what I'm going to talk about over the course of the next 40 minutes or so is that really we're not spending enough time focusing on solving for that. So again, why is this important? This is focused a lot on healthcare data, but for the most part, this is applicable across all industries. But I picked healthcare because, for one, we spend a lot of time talking to healthcare professionals, security professionals, and healthcare is the most expensive type of data breach out there. So yeah, we'll go into some cost centers on why healthcare is so expensive, but as of, on average, is the most expensive type of data breach. And this is a little, maybe not the award you want to win, but healthcare is topped for the last 11 consecutive years, topped as the highest cost in data breaches. So, for over a decade now, it continues to be very expensive. So where are we in terms of the state of the breach? It continues to go up, and that's not because of inflation. There's just more and more data out there, and therefore there's more and more data to be stolen. The average cost of a data breach, as you can see, I highlighted it, it's increased nearly 10% year over year. That's from 2020 to 2021. We're only halfway through 2022, but what we're seeing is that trend is going to continue on. And last year, or 2020 to 2021, was the largest single-year cost increase in the last 7 years. So again, we're not seeing this pace slow down at all. We're actually seeing it getting worse. So you might ask yourself, what kind of data is actually getting stolen? Because when people say information data, it's a very ambiguous term. So what actually is being stolen is customer PII for the most part. So customer PII, patient data, that's all very interesting data to breach, and there's actually a per record cost. So it's about $180 as of today for each patient or customer PII data that gets out there. And that's up $30 from just a couple years ago. And then so another question is, why now? It's hasn't data breach has always been a problem? For one, yes. But for two, if you think about it, right now with the remote work, with COVID, or because of COVID in 2020, a lot of organizations moved to remote work, and they weren't ready for that. And at the end of the day, they had built a lot of systems that were based off of a perimeter. But all of a sudden, you have a workforce that's working at their house, but maybe working at a coffee shop, especially now that things are getting better from a pandemic standpoint. You're going to see a lot more people on workcations working all over the world. So depending on what kind of Wi-Fi they're connected to and all that, it causes a lot of attack vectors now. So it's really just without adapting to that. It just opens organizations up for a lot of different ways to get breached. And there's actually numbers associated with this, which is pretty cool. So the $1.07 million difference in data breaches collected over, seeing if their remote work was a factor versus not a factor. So I don't know about you, Phalanx doesn't particularly have an extra $1 million lying around in the case of a data breach to deal with remote work, but it'd be a lot cheaper to just implement security features to work around it. So here's another poll. Whose organization experienced some sort of data breach in the last 3 years? Got a couple, awesome. So we have a follow-up poll. Who of those people who had their organization experience a data breach, who's in the healthcare industry? Looks like we got a winner, yes. So here's a fun fact. More than 93% of healthcare organizations have experienced a data breach in the past 3 years. Just out of curiosity, is anyone in a healthcare organization in here that didn't get breached in the last 3 years? I guess no. So, hey, 93% is really high. So yeah, again, getting more expensive. It's up a couple $1 million than it was a couple years ago. And at the end of the day, this is a double than the global average of data breach cost. So it's just getting more expensive. Healthcare continues to be a very profitable business to attack. And the more profitable it is, the more it becomes a focus. So you're wondering, maybe, what's some more reasons why healthcare is a big target? Is HIPAA involved? So the short answer is yes. So $50,000 is the number of what a HIPAA violation could cost you. It could cost as little as $100, but $50,000 is not cheap for smaller organizations. A health tech company, that's the kind of thing that could put you out of business if you're a small business. About $400,000, the average HIPAA penalty cost in 2021. Again, these aren't small numbers for smaller organizations. Even for a large hospital system, I'm sure they're not looking to spend $500,000 because of these HIPAA violations. And then post-breach response is one of the biggest issues or one of the biggest cost centers associated with a HIPAA breach in particular. So, talking about the cost centers, wanted to spend a little time just to break down, not everyone's had experience with paying for a breach, hopefully. But if you have been, what we're looking at is this is the breakdown of where the costs are associated with. So 29%. Is actually just, of the cost is trying to figure out what happened, what got breached. Part of HIPAA, actually, I should have included this graphic, but part of HIPAA is if the file or if the data was encrypted, then there was no breach. But if it wasn't encrypted, then there's a number of steps you have to take to determine if a breach even occurred and what got breached. So that's actually really interesting because if you think about it, organizations have to pay for data breaches, pay for more data than was actually truly breached because they don't know what exactly was breached. So part of that, again, detection, escalation. 38% seems kind of obvious, but in terms of what it is, but lost business. So, what can go into that is even people just not trusting your organization anymore. So there was a Target breach a number of years ago that actually affected their sales after that because people were like, well, I don't want to use my credit card at Target if it's just going to get on the dark web afterwards. So in addition to not trusting your organization and distrust and obviously, let's say it's a ransomware attack and things are shut down, then at that point, there's nothing you can do business-wise until you fix that. 6% notification, and that's just letting people know that their data was out there. Pretty sure. Quick side poll again. Has anyone not received a letter ever that that says your data has been breached and we're paying for a year of, sir. Wow. I hope, keep that streak going. That's amazing. Okay, so one day you may receive in the mail a letter that says your data has been breached X, Y, and Z. Like, could have even been 4 years. Actually, this happened recently. I was talking to somebody. They had gone to the hospital 4 years ago, and they received a letter this week that said their data was just breached, but because their data was sitting in a database 4 years ago, that data left too. So pretty much what you get is a year of monitoring. So that's the consolation prize for having your data out there. But anyway, so 6% of the cost is associated with that kind of a notification, and then 27%, again, the post-breach responses, and that's just dealing with the aftermath of a breach, whether it be settlements or even like additional controls, that kind of knee-jerk reaction of, oh, we lost all this data, maybe we should fire our CISO and go buy a DLP tool, which we all know is not going to be worth any money. So anyway, so the best way to kind of walk through this, wanted to walk through an example, right? So we have a real company this is a real scenario that happened, fake name, but I didn't try too hard to make it fake. So if you know this organization, I just shortened it down to M, so for their privacy's sake. So anyway, hopefully none of you are from M Health. So anyway, we're gonna walk through kind of a data breach at M Health, see how that went through for them, see how the effect of that cyber breach can have on a health organization, and then to kind of talk through what went wrong. And spoiler alert, people went wrong. So backstory: what happened? What alerted the organization? How do they even know the a breach occurred? So they actually got a missed payment. So they're like, well, that's strange. I guess their vendor got a missed payment. So their vendor was like, hey, there's something wrong here. So they're like, hey, by the way, M Health, there is a missed payment, and this is July of 2021. So this is a pretty recent, less than a year ago event. So M Health, of course, is like, well, we got to now go figure out if a breach or what is going on right now. So again, not surprising here is a business email compromise. So what happened was their vendor contractor had a business email compromise, and it was actually several threat actors got in. So it was kind of a party in there, so to speak. Pretty much everyone, but maybe the contractor was perusing those emails. And then they were able to essentially use that compromised email as a way to phish other people to get, work through the organization, essentially being able to legitimize themselves with that email account because it's coming from an actual email from that organization. So the infamous supply chain attack, so GG. This is another case of a supply chain attack, which is annoying, obviously, for all of us, as you can spend all the money in the world securing your organization, especially if you're using a perimeter-based system or architecture, and if your vendors get hacked, and they have your data, then there's kind of nothing you can do about it. So speaking of GG supply chain attack, another poll. So I don't know if that's like a dated reference. Is GG still cool? Do people still use GG? Looks like I'm getting 0. All right, is there? Oh no, we got 1. We got 2. So I wanted to also translate this for our Gen Z folk. Which I believe would be, does GG still slap no cap? If that helps. All right, so kind of going more into, how did this attack occur, walking through the data breach itself. So again, the contractor's email was compromised. Threat actors were able to use those emails to legitimize themselves and then perform more phishing attacks. So they were able to phish for over 3 months of, again, kind of, honestly, I'm very curious about the contractor. I don't know if they looked into their send box and was like, oh, hey, look, there's a bunch of emails asking for a bunch of sketchy information that I don't remember sending. Who knows? Maybe they just don't do a lot of work on their email. But anyway, so the compromised accounts that they ended up getting through those phishing attacks had patient information that were included, and again, employee data for mHealth too. So in this case, they were able to steal not just only customer PII patient data, but also employee data, which they can obviously use and sell, but they can also use that to perpetrate more attacks. So they can use pretty much as mHealth is a vendor to other organizations, they can jump across even more organizations because they have that legitimate employee data. So looking into the aftermath of what this attack cost. So it's a $7 million average. The average cost, again, using the $180 PII, $7 million. Like, that's not cheap. Again, not a lot of organizations, small businesses don't have that lying around just waiting for a settlement. The HIPAA violations alone were almost $4 million of that. And again, part of that goes into the post-breach response. Again, was the highest part of that payment-wise, 60%. Same for, and then the other was the detection and escalation. Again, just paying for, or the money involved in just figuring out what data got breached and having to pay for the ones that they couldn't prove that wasn't breached. Again, $7 million is pretty pricey for a supply chain attack. So, what is the leading cause of breaches? We got a people guess? We got any other guesses? It's HackerMan. Nah, I'm kidding. It's HackerMan. Let's just call it a day. No. Yes, so people, human error, not surprising. And it's something that we've all, all have experienced and dealt with. So basic, and it's not even, big, massively orchestrated attacks or, massive errors on a employee's fault, but it's just like really basic, small things that add up and open up your organization to have different attack vectors. And it's been the same issue for who knows how many years. But really interestingly, if you think about, like, again, kind of like, so human errors, not very specific. What are some of the human errors that are causing these problems? Obviously, phishing is, not being able to determine a phishing email. Again, that's probably the most common that people think about. But misdelivery, 36% of errors is misdelivery. And that's just, I accidentally sent you data that you shouldn't see. And obviously that is actually pretty scary if you think about that. 36% of data breaches is somebody just didn't pay attention who they sent the data to. And the next is, publishing errors and misconfiguration. Again, that's pretty scary and sometimes out of your control. So there's a case of Microsoft for OneDrive. So there was a person who logged into their corporate OneDrive account, and they noticed that all the files were not their company's files, but just another company's files. And what happened was, on the server side of Microsoft, somebody did some sort of misconfiguration on the policy, and they just were showing other people's data. So I don't think that actually resulted in any stolen or lost data from a breach perspective, but very well could have been, right? So it's really, especially now we're moving more into like cloud services, it's hard to say that we control our own data when something like that could happen. And then the next one after that is web application attacks. So that one, you guys know all about web app attacks, so we won't go too deep into that. So how bad is human error? Again, phishing, not surprising there, but it is on top, continues to be a problem. There is not enough phishing education out in the world to stop people from just clicking the thing. I mean, and again, this isn't a security professionals get it right all the time. I've clicked some sketchy links sometimes and I fell victim to an internal corporate phishing campaign to like suss people out. So, it's like, it happens sometimes. You're tired, not really paying attention. Like, it happens, like human error happens. So instead of trying to wipe away the fact that it happens, we really need to start focus on and addressing it and acknowledging that it is, and how do we help people to not do this kind of thing. So again, humans are the problem with 2 R's. Unintentional, but hey, human error, right? If that 2 R's was me accidentally typing someone's name wrong and sending some data to a different email account, that would have been a data breach. And even with ransomware, 13% of that deals, has some sort of human-related aspect to it. So again, we're digging deeper a little bit, like what is human error really costing us? At the end of the day, from a business perspective, a lot of business owners, that's the bottom line, right? That's what matters to them. But at the end of the day, if you can quantify how much human error costs, it piques a lot of people's interest. So business email compromise continue to be the most expensive type of data. They're not the most common, but they're the most expensive. And the reason why is that a lot of people, again, sometimes myself included, use our emails like a ghost file server. So that's not good. So let's say you're sending these massive Excel files full of all kinds of data, even if it stays within within your organization, not even including the fact that people are emailing themselves to their personal accounts, corporate information. But yeah, those things just sit there unless you're cleaning out your inbox all the time. There could be years of files in people's emails just sitting there, could be breached. And yeah, so just ghost file server. So yeah, who does not like send attachments or who deletes attachments all the time when you send and receive? I don't think anyone does, because it's burdensome, right? Like that's just the way it is. But yeah, looking at a $5 million average on the business email compromises, and again, that's because if you think about data like PII as a per PII record cost, and who knows how many again, Excel files, PDFs, yada yada yada, and that's not even including when people just straight up put social security numbers in the email. But yeah, I mean, if you even think about for if you're buying a house or your accountant, they're just like, hey, just shoot me all this stuff with your all kinds of sensitive information, and you're like, you just want me to email that to you? And they usually, sometimes they have a data room, but a lot of times they're just like, no, you just send it, it's fine. It's not fine, but yeah. So going into what is the real fundamental issue here? And it's the clash between security and generally what we as humans are trying to do with our lives. Even security professionals, our job isn't to do the secure practices, it's to try to secure the organization. So again, requirements versus security. Human error really deals with the fact that those are just fundamentally two different things. When people are trying to do their job, trying to be productive, it's counter to doing a secure action. So at the end of the day, if it's between doing something for your job and doing the right thing from a security perspective, often people are like, well, I'm not getting paid to make security decisions, I'm getting paid to do my job. And again, the best you can get is security conscious people who are like, let me try to do the right thing. But there is always there's a point where people break on that. So given that, we're gonna play a little game. And it's going to be a poll-based game. So pretty much what we're about to do is we're going to walk through a number of scenarios of would you rather if you did this security decision and a negative implication of it. So we're going to start easy. So who would do what's right from a security perspective, but you'd lose your job? So would you do the right thing security-wise, knowing that you'd lose your job if you did it? Who would do it? We got one. We got a couple. All right, if you don't do it, you might lose your job. But yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? It's like, hey, doing the right thing, protecting corporate's data. But if you lose your job doing it, at the end of the day, it's not your data, it's their data, but it's your job. So it's interesting. So here we go. We're going to walk it down a little bit. Who would do, would you do a security perspective, but do the right thing from a security perspective, but you get a bad reputation? So let's say, that's good. You honest people, I love it. Because, at the end of the day, not everyone values privacy or security. So, there's a time where if doing the right thing does make you, a quote-unquote bad person, but it's tough. So let's get a little bit more loose with it. How about you do what's right, but you're late on a deadline? All right. And what about you are about to, like, it's either you do the security thing or you don't do the security thing, you're gonna miss your flight. So who would, I realize I didn't word these as great, but who is willing to not do the security thing to not miss their flight? Or I guess, or do the security thing and miss their flight? We got a couple, but I mean, if you think about it, like, again, good on you guys, but just, you know, we're at a security conference. If I asked this to non-security people, imagine what these answers would be. Vacation flight. This is your, so you've been running these security ops for a full year straight, 16-hour days, 7 days a week, and this is finally your 2-week vacation that you're going on. And if you miss this, you're going to like Australia or something. It's gonna take you like 36 hours. So if you miss this flight, it's a big deal. Who's missing the flight? All right, so I think this is the last one. And again, it feels easy to say, like, yeah, I'll do the right thing from a security perspective and stay a little late on a Friday night. So who's willing to do that? Yeah, so that's good, a lot of hands. I'm glad, especially as a lot of security professionals in this room, I'm glad you're willing to stay a little late on Friday and do the right thing. But again, like if we're asking this to a crowd of people that aren't security conscious, aren't security professionals, don't care about, you know, the corporate security per se, this actually becomes, this is like the crux of the issue, right? Like the people and again, if they're honest, if you ask them in corporate training, then people go, yes, I'll do the right thing. But, you know, honestly, do people do the right thing when all the time? Like, and again, there's like, who knows, like, let's say it's do the right thing from a security perspective, or like I need to go pick up my kids, or like I'm gonna be, you know, late to something else big, or something negative is gonna happen to me in my personal life, right? So it's like that the more people there are, the more exceptions to the rule there are, and there's always room for, you know, that gap between what is right from security and what just people living their lives, and that's where the human error comes in. So, and another issue with cybersecurity, or with human error, is the shadow IT, right? So like we all love to think about and oftentimes talk about, I don't know if for all the security certifications out there, if you've ever gone to a boot camp for them, one of the first things they always tell you is don't think about, they're like, these certifications are gonna be harder for people with more experience because you're gonna think about what really happens, and you're getting tested on what the ideal should happen. And the reality is, you know, shadow IT exists because oftentimes organizations start with a security control and push that out to people, but they don't really think about, like, how do people actually operate on a day-to-day basis? So, you know, again, they'll use unapproved tools, they'll use, you know, maybe like Google Drive, personal accounts, personal emails, anything to just kind of make their lives easier, because, you know, at the end of the day, again, it's security decision versus getting the job done for what I'm getting paid for to get a paycheck. So again, like, those two don't usually play nice together, and the harder you make the security side, the harder they're gonna go try to bypass that. So instead of just pretending it doesn't exist, I think we should really just focus on and embrace the reality that shadow IT is a thing, and instead of trying to tell people to do the right thing, again, if you're relying on your users to do the right thing, it's a losing battle. Like you can't know 100%, right? So that, again, part of what, you know, we need to be doing is focus on addressing and embracing that this stuff exists, and really try to think about, you know, start at the human layer and build security on top of that. Like, what are people actually doing? Are people using their personal accounts? How do we what is the problem that they're using their personal accounts for that our, you know, organization isn't supplying them from a productivity standpoint? So if you really start with that, build security around that, and then you know, these shadow IT issues will go away, because at the end of the day, people don't want to make a negative security decision. They want to just do their job and go home. You know, it's like at the end of the day, that's what they want to do. They're not trying to open your organization up to, well, insider threat is a different thing, but for the average employee isn't actively trying to hinder the organization. But yeah, actually, that last point, if you look at it, the more at risk, so that's actually a really interesting stat, right? So like 54% of IT teams consider themselves more at risk of a data breach after COVID-19 and the remote work and all the policy changes that went along with it. So if you think about that, like things are getting worse, but they don't have to be. But if we're not addressing it and we're just trying to operate in the same day-to-day that we were doing back when perimeter security was fine, then you're just going to have a bad time. So what are we doing about it today? Honestly, that number one is probably the number one knee-jerk reaction that organizations have in the state of a breach. They say, "Uh-oh, we got breached. Probably was a phishing attack. What are we going to do about it? Oh, let's run simulated phishing attacks against our employees. Let's have them sit through an hour of training on how not to get phished, and let's keep doing that over and over and over again, and maybe it won't happen." But all it takes is that one person to forget to do it, click on the thing, be a little tired, less vigilant. You know, it's like there's all kinds of things. And education is very important, but isn't the be-all, end-all, and shouldn't be the only thing an organization is doing to combat human error. Not to mention, getting high-quality cyber education is difficult, right? So it's hard to be able to distill it down so that your everyday users and employees, it's meaningful to them, and it's not just just a joke to them. And worse off, it's actually hard to also get education that isn't phishing focused, right? So at the end of the day, it's like, how do we find more ways to engage people and teach them, more about security and less about just specifically like, please stop clicking links. And yeah, the second one is what I was mentioning earlier. Like, what are we doing? We keep just tightening the controls, even though that's the problem. The problem is tight controls, so people bypass it with shadow IT, and then there's a breach. And then we tighten down the controls even more so that there can be less of a thing, and then so people find another way around that. And it's just a game of cat and mouse if we keep approaching it by saying, hey, let's lock it down and make it hard for people to do their jobs. So more policies, more controls, that's not helping, but that's what a lot of people do, because again, it's a knee-jerk reaction of how do we solve this problem? Let's do so by let's go just buy some stuff. Like we talked to some systems like that, they're just like, frazzled, and they're like, let's just get some things. Let's say that we're doing more work. But at the end of the day, especially if it's policy-based controls, that's a lot of hours. That's a lot of time. My co-founder and I spoke to a CISO that had purchased like $1 million of DLP that's just been sitting on the shelf for like 9 months, because he's like, yeah, I just don't have the time to have my team put it in place yet. He's like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to hate it once I'm done with it, but I paid for it, so I need to like eventually do it first before I look at more solutions. But I mean, that's a huge problem, right? That's super expensive. That's just going to create, actually, what it's going to end up doing also is, I talked to another CISO that was saying that he just, any of these policy-based systems just create exceptions in terms of, it's like an exception mill. So it's like, and he's at a health system, and he says like pretty much they put in a control that requires these policies, and the next day they get a bunch of their doctors that are like, you know what, like I get it, that's an important control, but it shouldn't apply to me. And then so, that happens every single, so they make an exception for them, they make another exception for them, and then that goes around, opens up some more issues and holes, so they build some more policies around that to try to fix that, and then it just becomes this huge mess. So tighter controls, more policies, not working for us. That's not what we should be doing more of. So what should we be doing? What is the future of cybersecurity look like? How do we adapt and evolve to the growing threats and our change in work environments and productivity? So the number one bullet point right there, it's like reduce the number of security decisions that people need to make. Because again, if you're leaving it up to the end user to make the right decision 100% of the time, then you're going to be disappointed pretty much the entire time because, again, there's that fundamental rub between that security decision and what their goals are. So if we reduce the number of security decisions they make, through automation, through anything else, that'll help make it so that when they do have to ultimately make a security decision, they're not burned out on it. They're willing to think a little bit more, and you've made their lives easier for 90% of the way. They're a little more likely to do the right thing on that last 10%. Next thing, kind of tied directly into that, you need to focus on the inefficiencies and particularly the human factor, right? So instead of starting with the control, pushing it down to the people, start with the people, figure out what are people doing, why are they trying to use their personal accounts, why are they passing things through Google Drive, why are they doing this, why are they doing that? And you'll find that there will be a productivity issue that the company isn't addressing and causing that. So again, instead of saying, well, you're bad, you shouldn't do that, sit through another hour of training, it's like, hey, let's actually provide you a tool that solves your problem and does so in a way that ultimately does what we want, which is a higher security posture because of it. So instead of saying, hey, let's put a control in, another policy, and it's like, let me buy you a security-focused productivity tool and use that instead of doing what you're doing, and hopefully and ideally that makes your life even easier than running your stuff through a chain of shadow IT. And speaking of that, going into acknowledge the fact that shadow IT exists. The more you ignore it, the more it's same with remote work. So organizations that aren't embracing it in terms of just acknowledging that it's happening, like people are working remotely even if that's not the company's policy, right? Like people go home and do work. And for sure if it is the company's policy, but when it's not, and that's actually where the shadow IT comes from, right? So if you aren't embracing that in this day and age, people will find a way to make it work. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people are just trying to do their jobs, and the more security gets in the way of that, the more shadow IT exists. But if we just try to say, hey, don't use your personal accounts, here's a training for not using your personal accounts, it's never going to be solved. And then again, embrace that remote work is a thing. Even if the company's policy isn't a remote work policy, make sure you have a way for people to safely work remotely. So, a lot of that was, hey, we have a VPN. It's like, okay, so what else are you doing to protect your data as it sits outside of your office perimeter? Last one there, automation. So don't you dare buy anything that says AI in it until you've fully automated things. Don't even bother with the AI stuff until you've automated things. Because at the end of the day, again, it's solving what the issue is a productivity issue. So being able to automate past security decisions, being able to automate why people are doing the wrong thing. Bring more automation. If you want people to do something, the more you can just do it for them, they'll accept it. People are willing to accept a security decision that happened upon them versus making that decision. So again, automation is the way to go on that, and the more you can automate from security, the better, because at the end of the day, the attacks are evolving and they're using automation to attack. So should also use automation to defend. This one's more aimed towards, I would say, small organizations, like maybe even like SMBs, but there's a lot of existing controls out there that are just being underutilized. So a lot of tools that you have multi-factor authentication available. Their password managers are proven to reduce any kind of attacks related to passwords, because at the end of the day, you can actually have secure passwords in a way that people will be able to use them versus them using the one password for every single login, right? So, because when that happens, as you all know, maybe Bank of America is hard to break into, but maybe myfunsite.com isn't so hard to break into. And if you're using the same login password for Bank of America and myfunsite.com, like, hey, that's just easy. Username and ID password, let me try it on all the banks and see what works. So yeah, just really leaning into existing stuff. It doesn't cost anything extra, both on a personal level, and again, if you're a smaller organization, like this is the way to go. And then you can look at, hey, what are my gaps after that? What do I actually need to spend money on? This is actually, so I had built this slide a while ago, but this seems to be the theme of the conference in terms of talk to a lot of people that have mirrored the same thing. Is just stop it with the perimeter. Like we're past that. You know, again, that's not how it works anymore. You can't say we're going to keep attackers out 100% of the time, and we're going to keep data from egressing our organization 100% of the time. It's just impossible. So instead of thinking about just out versus in, we need to think about, and this buzzword-wise goes into zero trust, but we need to think about how do we actually protect our assets in a way that, assuming that attackers are getting on our devices, assuming attackers are getting in our networks, how do we protect our assets? One of those assets is data. One of those assets is your devices. How do you actually secure on an individual as possible, as granular as possible way of securing that? So that way, remote work, if you start with that, everything else becomes not so bad, right? So if you solve that problem, then remote work all of a sudden is not a big deal. Right? They can travel anywhere with their devices because you solve the asset protection problem. If you don't, then it's like, how do we make sure that people are going through the VPN? How do we make sure we have enough bandwidth on our VPNs and throughputs that we're not slowing everyone down so that they turn the VPN off and then, oh, hey, look, now they're connected to sketchy Wi-Fi. So again, like if there's anything you remember, if there's anything you tweet out there, this one. Yeah, so it's really the difference between at the bottom, the highlighted point. Instead of hoping and wishing on a prayer that people are going to do the right thing, just plan for them to do the wrong thing, and then how do we build a secure posture, assuming that the wrong thing is going to occur? Because if we're hoping for the best, that's not a good security strategy. So last slide here, and just next steps, right? So what are some easy to do next steps if you wanted to implement kind of the evolution of cybersecurity? Number one is just stop buying the buzzwords, right? So at the end of the day, like I said, there's a lot of existing capabilities that you already have in your organization that just need to be leveraged, correctly, or used. Period. Like straight up used. And again, really just focusing on the productivity aspect will flush out a lot of issues with the human error. So again, also with the education, instead of only doing phishing education, let's focus on teaching users about those other things out there, about password managers. Give some references, maybe buy a corporate one for everybody. Using MFA, why MFA is important, making sure people are turning it on their personal devices. And the more education we have surrounded by about kind of daily and personal security, the more that's going to be reflected as they're at work with the organization. And the last bullet point is what I'll leave you with here is just solve the real issues at hand, which is just a lack of time and a lack of interest from the user base. I've never spoken to any security professional who says, "Oh, I have too many employees that work in our security staff. I don't know what to do with them all." Or we have so much time. I've never talked to a CISO who's like, all I got is people and time and money. And he's like, "Oh yeah, right. Where do you work? Let me jump on that team." But yeah, I mean, there's constant lack of time, both on your end user standpoint. They're just trying to get their job done, and the constant lack of time from a security professional standpoint in terms of there's never enough you can do, and there's definitely never enough you can do if you're focused on just chasing your users and telling them to try to do the right thing. And then again, that last one, just assume people aren't interested, assume people are going to do the wrong thing. How do we protect our assets if they're going to do the wrong thing? And with that, really appreciate you picking me over spinach artichoke dip. Hopefully you don't regret it. And yeah, if you have any questions, find me on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm happy to answer them. Also, I think we have some time. I can answer some questions, 5 minutes. Otherwise, if you see me afterwards, come up to talk to me. I'd love to talk. But yeah, any questions? Yes. Yeah, definitely. So the question is, acknowledging the fact that most organizations do acknowledge human error as an issue and currently are pushing out education for that, but the issue being not a lot of accountability based off of that. What do I feel about implementing accountability into that training as a part of performance review, for example? So yeah, great question and great point. I actually do think that it does go back into what I said in terms of the big fundamental issue is security decisions versus job, doing whatever for your job. So if you make security decisions part of their job, then yeah, that actually does solve part of the issue. And again, the more we spend time putting some sort of value on security beyond just like you should do the thing, I think it will help. So yeah, I mean, I would say I would 100% agree with adding if data security or any kind of security is important to your organization, adding a level of that into someone's job performance review. And then after that, it just really would just take how do we properly capture those metrics? How do we be able to build that provably into that person's performance in a way that we can say, hey, you aren't doing the right thing, you are doing the right thing, yada, yada. But overall, I'd say I think that's a great idea. Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, so the question is, how many people are making too much mistakes because they're tired? And I myself have almost clicked on a sketchy phishing email. And honestly, the reason why I didn't fully click it was I got distracted. But not gonna lie, but I was tired, right? I was tired. It was like I forget what the email actually was, but it was something like similar to like something I was dealing with, and again I was tired, and I was like, oh, let me just because I pretty much was reading a bunch of emails, queuing up a bunch of links, so I almost clicked it, and then actually I'm pretty sure my co-founder called me and I got distracted, but or maybe I was just watching a YouTube video, but. We'll leave that up to your imaginations on what I actually did, got distracted by. But yeah, I mean, I almost clicked it, right? So it's like, I know the right thing to do, but the more tired you are, the more, the less vigilant you are, right? And again, it goes into driving. Like you wouldn't want someone on the road who hasn't slept, for 24 hours, let's say. So why would you want them to make security decisions? Yes. I have not. I mean, I actually really agree with that. So the question being, instead of just waiting for people to make the mistake, let's normalize kind of a community looking together. So I've seen versions of that, so that's a way better version than what I've seen. And what I've seen is IT and security staff saying, hey, you should email me when it's a sketchy email and I'll look through it. The issue there is, again, going back to the security staff time, people ain't nobody got time for that. And they get a lot of emails that aren't phishing emails, which again, going back to human error, if you have a human looking at a bunch of emails, eventually they're gonna slip up. And again, it just becomes just a way to, it's not effective. So I agree with the community approach. That's time for me. But again, if you have any other questions, find me. Thanks.